Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome. Welcome as well as hello. This is Movies You Missed, and I am your host, Jace Cudlin. And this is the show where we discuss movies that you might have missed. You know, those diamonds in the rough, the movies that you stand by when others don't, the ones you fight for, the ones you will argue till your dying breath that they're not as bad as everyone says. I discovered I had so many movies like that in my personal, lists of faves. I'm like, you don't like this movie? You're crazy. Or you don't like this movie? Let me tell you why you should like this movie. Watch it through this lens. We just all have those oddballs, that make our movie taste questionable, despite the fact that we want to be credible sources. But then we're like, well, I actually do kind of like Godfather Part 3. And people are like, what? What are you talking about? That movie's terrible. But for whatever reason, you like it. Or we just like to discuss movies that people might not have actually seen at all. Hence movies you might have missed. And within that basic framework, we've been doing throughout the course of the summer a series consisting of all sequels in film franchises that I personally feel are underrated. I guess I hope you feel the same way if you've been listening to these episodes this entire time. Hopefully you haven't been sitting there just going like, man, yet another sequel that actually sucks that this guy likes. What a total lunatic. What an imbecile. But yeah, especially sequels, like I've said in the past, get a bad rap. People think or even just automatically assume without seeing it that a sequel to a movie, especially a good movie, like a really popular movie, because it usually is really popular movies that spawn sequels, because really popular movies make a lot of money. And then people are like, let's go back to that old well and see if we can draw some water and make another movie to make us a lot of money. And people do that all the time, of course. But the very nature of that, and the very nature that it's trying to, and the very notion that's trying to recreate something that was good, catch lightning in a bottle, automatically makes it kind of inferior to the thing it's trying to copy or recreate. But I don't necessarily think that's always the case. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think every single series we've covered, every single sequel we've done this season, has been a lesser work compared to the original, of course. If you look at the original 1978 Halloween, or the first RoboCop, or Friday the 13th, or the original Nightmare on Elm Street, or the original Alien, the original Predator, the original Jurassic Park, and the original Jaws, those are all some of the greatest movies ever made. Literally, I think all those movies I just mentioned are definitely in my top 25 movies ever made, for sure. They're all excellent. And even Friday the 13th, the first one, which isn't necessarily structurally sound movie, and isn't by any means one of the greatest movies ever made, is definitely a personal favorite of mine. Clearly, as I chose. But what I mean is just that just because these movies are so great, doesn't mean that their sequels are bad. If because you don't have to compare, is what I'm basically trying to say, in a very wordy, stumbly kind of way. But it's just sure, today we're covering Jaws 2. And Jaws 2 is not nearly the movie that Jaws 1 is. The original 1975 Jaws, if you put a gun to my head, I'd probably say it's my favorite movie of all time. Because it's truly, truly perfect. I don't think there's anything I would possibly change about the movie. And it's so good that I've only maybe seen it 3 or 4 times in my life, because I don't necessarily want it to lose any of the allure or the shine that it has, you know? It's so good, I don't want it to dull. I don't want it to get predictable. I want to watch it every couple years and still be surprised by a lot of the stuff that happens, if that makes sense. Whereas Jaws 2, within the vacuum, like it's the second installment in the Jaws franchise, but in the vacuum, if you watch, like I just yesterday or Monday, because today, I'm recording on Wednesday, September 14th, and I watched the movie, 2 days ago on Monday. I just watched the movie without having watched any of the other ones for a good long while. I just watched it, and it was terrific. It was phenomenal. I think I loved it. It was actually probably my best viewing, having watched it. Like, whereas Halloween 2, I think it's good if you watch it back to back with Halloween 1. This, I think, if you just watch it on its own, having like seen the first one before, having the knowledge of the first one, it's a very fun film to watch. A very awesome. It has like enough about what you remember about the first one, liked about the first one, and enough differences. And like, it's not just like like a Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, where it's like, oh, the story is literally basically the same. The characters just have different names. But there's like a whole lot of different stuff in this one. I mean, Jaws 1 is like mainly focuses on like the main three guys going out and hunting a shark. Whereas in this movie, sure, Roy Scheider is in it, and a lot of it does focus on him. But for most of the movie, no one is even sure that there is a shark. And a lot of it is just like Roy Scheider on his own trying to like prove to people and prove to himself that like there is indeed a shark. And then like there's the teenage element to this one where a lot of it follows like Roy Scheider's oldest son, like Roy Scheider's character, Martin Brody's oldest son, Mike Brody, and like his friends, as they are trying to like have fun in the summer and trying to enjoy themselves and trying to just act like regular teens do when you're living on an island. But, their plans are ruined by the inevitable arrival of a shark. So it's like a totally different animal than the first one. I mean, sure, there is kind of like there isn't even a shark hunt, because the main problem is that it's like it's a rescue mission more than like a hunt. So it's just very different from the first one in a lot of ways, but again, it's similar enough to where you really like it, or at least I did. My personal history with the Jaws franchise does not go back very far, I will say. I think I want to say that I did not watch the original Jaws all the way through. I maybe had seen parts on television when I was a kid, like in hotel rooms on vacation when I was bored, or just channel surfing at home. Because I knew the ending. I had seen the ending, but I did not watch the movie all the way through until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And of course, I enjoyed it. I wasn't really like looking too deep into it, but then I think I watched it again. I watched all of them all the way through for the first time, maybe 3 years ago, because I'd seen Jaws 1, and then I was like, oh, there's a bunch of other ones I should watch, and then I watched Jaws 2, Jaws 3D, and then Jaws 4: The Revenge. And yeah, that was 3 years ago, and I think I've watched Jaws and Jaws 2 like once a year since then, and I think I did recently watch all 3 or all 4 of the originals maybe a year ago. But yeah, I mean, like, your appreciation for Jaws and the story and the acting and just the atmosphere only grows every time you watch it, I think. I mean, it's truly an exceptional film, incredibly well acted. I think over this past year, I finally read the Peter Benchley's Jaws book. And I think the movie's even better than the book. I mean, it's truly perfect. Whether it's like, Steven Spielberg's directing. I mean, the choice to not even show the shark until the very end of the movie, which was like not even something they really wanted to do, but something they were forced to do because of the problems with the mechanical shark. Or, I mean, the performances of like Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw and like Lorraine Gary and Murray Hamilton. I mean, everyone is so good in that movie, and the cinematography is just beautiful. I don't even know who did the cinematography for the first one, but it looks so good. I mean, and the cinematography, of course, is pretty similar in this. It's like that grainy, kind of dewy, like it's filmed through a cheesecloth or something. It just looks. Okay. So cinematography by Bill Butler. Bill Butler did the first one. He did like Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and The Conversation, and a bunch of other films. But yeah, the cinematography, of course, for Jaws 2 is pretty similar. But yeah, I mean, and now that I watched Jaws 2, I definitely will go and watch Jaws 3 and 4, because even though those are not stellar movies, I don't know, they connect me to Jaws, and they're different. And it's like a similar feel, but it's like not, it's like of course it's not the same thing as watching the same movie and over again. So it's just part of that world, and it's a world that I really, really do enjoy. And maybe we could cover 3 or 4 on this podcast. I'll let you know, because we're gonna take a couple weeks off after today, and I'll probably watch Jaws 3 and 4, and then I'll let you know come October how I'm feeling about those movies, whether I'm done with them forever or one of them surprised me, and we can do it on the podcast. But yeah, I definitely, because Jaws 3 and 4, I don't know, parts of them, if I remember correctly, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, are so boring that it does kind of lose me. And I kind of will like start doing other things. And like maybe if I'll try to pay attention like the whole way through, just so I can know in my heart of hearts that, oh yeah, this movie's not great. I do in fact own all of these movies on VHS though, and I have Jaws 1 and 2 on Laserdisc. So yeah, I mean, I can go back to them anytime I want to, which is a nice feeling. But yeah, I mean, this viewing of Jaws 2 was just incredible. I had a ball watching it. I actually got so immersed at times that I wasn't really taking a lot of notes. So even though I think this is one of the longer movies we've covered, because this movie's almost 2 hours. It's 116 minutes, so it's just under 2 hours. I think it's I only have 1, 2, 3, 4.5 pages of notes, which is not a lot, especially compared to the last 2 or 3 movies I did, where I had 5. I think for Jurassic Park 3, I had 5 pages of notes, and that movie's an hour and a half. So I think I just kind of became too immersed to take proper notes. And for that, I apologize. Sorry, there's someone's mowing their lawn with the loudest engine in the world. It's like an airplane engine attached to a lawnmower. It's super irritating. But I have my cat's bed is in the window, and he's sleeping in there right now, so I can't close the window. So yeah, if you don't, hopefully you guys don't mind. But yeah, anyway, we're talking Jaws 2. And I think I mentioned previously, after today we're gonna take a couple weeks off, because this is the summer series finale. I said I was gonna do 9 initially, and then I shortened it to 8, and this here we are, number 8. This was the culmination, because Jaws 2 is definitely my favorite movie that we've covered this season, because Jaws 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time somehow. I really, really stand by this sequel, and I was really looking forward to doing it. And I said start it off with RoboCop 2 and Halloween 2, because you love those, but you gotta save Jaws 2 till the end. So here we are, summer in the books. Today's the 14th of September, so I mean, summer's kind of been over for most people for a while, and then but I wanted to do a calendar type summer. So even though I'm recording on the 14th, I probably won't release it till this Saturday, Sunday. ish. So, and then like it'll be officially fall September 22nd. So, but yeah, I mean it's been a absolute pleasure getting to do all these movies. I think sticking with a theme and like for the season really allowed me to focus in and like laser in on what I was supposed to do, and it really kind of added some structure that I think I definitely actually lacked in the past. Because I think I did 8 episodes in the amount of time that I did the four that ended up making up the first season of the show, and that's because it was just all scattered random movies, unrelated. I think I did three horror movies, one a remake, two originals, and then I actually can't even remember what the other movie is. I know we did Leviathan and Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot and Friday the 13th Part 5, and then something else that I can't remember. But yeah, there was nothing connecting them. It was just like I was like going off of whims, and I was like, what movie off of these many lists that I've created do I feel like watching today and doing? But like, whereas if I have a theme, I'm like, oh, we'll do, these 10 movies in a matter of weeks, and I'll just carve out a day a week to watch the movie, or carve out another day a week to record it, and we're in business. And I think I'll keep that up for a while. Again, we've got the Halloween specials coming. We're going to do Halloween 4, 5, and 6. Starting in the second week of October, going all the way up to Halloween. And then we're going to take another brief break. And then we're going to start on the erotic thriller Winter. Which is, we're doing a classic Ohio winter, which starts in November, ends in like May. So I'll be doing 10 movies for that. And that'll be fun. I already got that list pretty much tamped down. Got some guests lined up for that one, as well as the Halloween special. So that'll be fun. That'll be interesting. And then after that, who knows? I think next summer we'll do this exact thing. We'll do sequel summer series part 2. And, I've got like a list of 35 plus movies that I can do for the other movie sequels. Maybe one of the Jawses will be in there. Who knows? But yeah, maybe we'll do something interesting for the spring. Maybe we'll do, because not to generalize and sound like one of those nerds, but Ohio spring really lasts maybe like a month before it's, it goes from being 30 degrees to 60, 70 for maybe like a month, like literally like the end of April, and then like by the end of May it's 80 degrees and it's summer. So maybe I'll do like a calendar spring though, and I'll do something, and then for the summer then we'll get back into sequels, because I think this is really fun. I'll roll with this. I think I have like I said, like maybe like 3 or 4 summers worth of sequels, and that list is growing every day because I can't get enough of these movie sequels. And oftentimes I'm finding too, which is so bizarre, that sequels I actually sometimes prefer to the original. And I just watched Leprechaun the other day, and I was just like, oh, this movie sucks. And then I watched Leprechaun 2, and I was like, whoa, this movie sucks significantly less than the first one, which is crazy. Or I definitely prefer Hellbound Hellraiser 2, sorry, to the initial Hellraiser. And I actually kind of like Hellraiser 3, and then like 4 and 5, and like those are not even bad at all. So yeah, don't worry, we got a lot locked in. Who knows what I'll do in the spring, or what I'll do next year during this time. I plan on doing a whole season of like high fantasy movies, cheesy action, maybe like a underrated comic book adaptation series. I have all these lists, and I have all these movies written down that I want to cover, and maybe if I can like sit down and organize them into specific seasons, then I can maybe have literally 5 or 6 years worth of non-stop podcasting lined up. So – I'll work on that during my off seasons. But yeah, anyway, let's talk Jaws 2. We'll get the initial stuff out of the way, and then we can get into it beat by beat and discuss the events and the plot of this delightful movie. So, Jaws 2 is a 1978 American thriller film. It was directed by a, I believe, French director named Jeannot Swark. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. I looked up numerous name pronunciations of it, so hopefully that is correct. He directed this movie. He directed Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve. He directed the Supergirl movie. That's like a totally absolute bonkers movie if you guys have ever seen that. But it's supposed to be in part of the canon with Christopher Reeve's Superman movies, so that's an interesting connection there. And what's the girl's name who plays Supergirl? Helen Slater. Yeah. But yeah, and he also directed Santa Claus the movie, which is not the Tim Allen one. Another movie about Santa Claus that's live action that came out in like 1985. I've never seen it, but he did it. He also directed the horror movie Bug, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but that's not that bad. And he directed a ton of episodes of he's worked like very prolifically. Is that even a word? Prolifically. He's been very prolific in television. He's directed numerous episodes of like Kojak, Jag, Bones, Castle, Numbers, Columbo, Heroes, Fringe, Smallville. He directed the 200th episode of Smallville. I mean, he went to Harvard, so this guy, worth his own salt as far as directors go. But yeah, and it was co-written by Carl Gottlieb, who actually wrote the original Jaws and would go on to write Jaws 3D. It was co-written by him and Howard Sackler, Howard Sackler wrote The Great White Hope, that famous movie about Joe Johnson beating Jim Jeffries in that famous boxing match. Cinematography by Michael Butler, who is of no relation to Bill Butler, who did the cinematography for the original, but pretty good in his own right. They like the visual styles of these two movies are pretty similar in look and feel, I think. But yeah, so this movie is of course a sequel to Steven Spielberg's Jaws, released in 1975, and is the second installment in the Jaws franchise. The film stars Roy Scheider, returning as Police Chief Martin Brody from the first one. Roy Scheider, Golden Globe Award-winning, Academy Award-nominated actor, who he was in Jaws, The French Connection, the 7-Ups, Marathon Man, all that jazz. Blue Thunder. He was in 2010, the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which will be possibly in our next sequel summer. Definitely consider it this year because I actually do kind of have a soft spot for that movie. And then he was also in that Sequest DSV show, which I don't know if you guys have seen it. That's not that bad. What a compliment. It's not that bad. What am I talking about? But yeah, it also stars Lorraine Gary, I'm sorry, who returns as Ellen Brody from the first movie, and then Murray Hamilton as Mayor Larry Vaughn from the first movie, and then Joseph Mascalo, Jeffrey Kramer, Colin Wilcox, Ann Dusenberry, Mark Gruner, Susan French, Barry Coe, all star as teens, like friends and rivals of Sheriff Brody's son, or Chief Brody, Sheriff Brody's son, because like I said, the teens play a prominent role in this one. And then also Keith Gordon is in this movie. Keith Gordon from Christine is in this movie in his first feature film role, which is neat. But yeah, the plot of this movie follows Chief Brody. It's 4 years later, and a bunch of bizarre accidents and disappearances start plaguing the island once more. The island of Amity Island, a fictional New England adjacent seaside resort town. And but yeah, Chief Brody begins to suspect that another great white shark is responsible, and he seeks to prove it. And of course, his suspicions are eventually proven true, or else there wouldn't be a movie. Um, but it was distributed by Universal, which I think this is like our second Universal in a row, right after Jurassic Park 3 last week, and it's the third Universal overall with Halloween 2. But it was also produced by the Zanuck Brown Company. Music for this was done by John Williams. Beautiful score this movie has. I think a lot of the scenes are really propelled to another level through the music he provides in the background. John Williams, of course, did the score to the original Jaws as well. Created the original Jaws theme, like dun 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 type beat. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, runtime though on this one 116 minutes, a little long, I have to say, because I definitely, personally, don't get me wrong, I love this movie, but I think it could have been edited down a bit. Because there's definitely like, I mean, we'll get into it when we get into the plot here. But like, man, it was just a little long. And of course, a lot of the times, a longer movie means just more to love. But sometimes a longer movie means more stuff that could be kind of trimmed off and taken out because you start to lose people. I mean, because like I understand you can't have like a thrill or a scare every scene. There's got to be gaps, but some of these gaps are a little long, and like I'll point them out when they're happening in the movie. But it does. I do almost get kind of lost, like how in Jaws 3 and 4 I said that I'm like, man, sometimes I just these movies really lose me. Like this almost had that, not quite. It's actually almost masterful the way I almost get lost, but then I'm reeled back in at the last second. But again, the original Jaws, not that I'll make these comparisons the whole time because I'll try to definitely avoid that because we're talking about Jaws 2 as a film by itself. But yeah, I mean, like, Jaws 1 doesn't have a single moment that takes me out. There's no moments where it starts to lose me at all. And again, like, it's like, I don't know. I'm definitely, like, as much as I don't like to think that I am, I'm definitely your average moviegoer. Where if the movie takes a turn and, like, all the intensity and all the suspense is just kind of, it bottoms out and is like drops, it's kind of hard to get me back. Like, oh man, not to bash this movie, because I think I enjoyed it for the most part, but I was watching the movie Drag Me to Hell yesterday. That's Sam Raimi, 2009, like, possession horror movie. And I don't know, there was just certain points where where it just really fell off for me. And then I got on my computer and I started, like, online shopping. And then I don't think I really paid attention much to, like, the very end. Which, like, I'm only loosely online shopping. If the movie were to pick back up in an interesting way, it could re-grab me. But that didn't happen for maybe a good 40-minute chunk of the movie. Yeah, and I don't know if I could say, like, specifically what. But yeah, whether there's the dated special effects or something, but I really kind of just, like, was like, oh, all right. And then I just kind of checked out, and I never really checked back in. And, like, that will happen. I mean, making movies and writing scripts has got to be so tough, because maybe you don't even see, like, writers and stuff don't even see where these moments are in films. But believe me, there are definitely those moments. Jurassic Park 3, which we talked about last week, is high and tight. It's a short script, or I mean, it's like a short movie with, like, a very kind kind of not bare bones script, but like there's just not a lot of fat on it, you know. They trimmed it down well. Or I can't remember, there was another movie I was watching recently that was only like an hour and 17 minutes or something. It was like 80 minutes long. And it was like, I'm like, yeah, there's not enough time for it to get boring. Like Jurassic Park 2 definitely is like a 2-hour movie, and it doesn't need to be at all. And there's definitely moments in that movie, like where, like after Eddie Carr dies, I just always check out of that movie, and I'm like, oh, or like when the dinosaur gets to like San Diego, that I'm like, oh, this is too stupid, I'm done. Which, you know, who knows what that says about me exactly. I'm just saying, I think it makes me a good. Sorry, I just knocked a bunch of shit over on my desk. What was I saying? But yeah, I think that makes me the perfect like movie viewer. Not the perfect, but like your average movie goer, viewer type person, because I'm not like laser focused. I'm like your average guy that can get average person that can get distracted, and will look for distractions if they are not being entertained. But yeah, so I don't know why I'm saying that about this movie so much, because this movie doesn't necessarily lose me at any point, like Jaws 3 and Jaws 4 might, or like Drag Me to Hell did. But anyway, the movie scored 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb. Pretty low. 61% on Rotten Tomato, low. 51% on Metacritic, abysmally low. Well, actually, not really. I mean, 51% people are like, oh, that's not bad. And I'm like, if we're looking at if we're in school, it's a D. Or no, that's an F. That's an F. And even 79% Google users is like one of the lower Google users scores we've had, which is interesting, because I think this might have been one of the better movies we've covered for sure. Why might you have missed this movie? Again, I think like got a lot of like mixed to negative reviews upon its release, and they're, unlike Jurassic Park 3, there hasn't been like a modern like reappraisal of its value. Like no one has like in like the last 10 years come to its defense and been like, that's not really as bad. I mean, I guess until I am right now, or maybe someone else has, but no one really like publicly, or high, like no one high profile. There hasn't been a movement, and maybe that's because they haven't released a Jaws movie since like 1987 or something. There hasn't been even a reboot or anything like that, which is actually kind of surprising if you think about it. But yeah, there has been no positive reappraisals of this movie. And also, I think Jaws 1 is so perfect that, and I mean, it ends so neatly with the shark dead, that you think, why would they even bother to make a sequel to this movie? I don't really need it anymore. It doesn't really call for any more. Like, I mean, like, some of these movies, like Halloween, I mean, like, at the end of it, the shape is, Michael Myers is alive. So, people would question, well, where's he going to go? Or, I mean, you look at Jurassic Park, the ending of Jurassic Park, and The Lost World. I mean, a lot of the dinosaurs are still alive. So, like, what's going on with those dinosaurs? That would, like, precipitate, I'm not sure if I'm using that word correctly, that would, like, garner a sequel. That begs a sequel, because you're still wondering. Like, I mean, Jaws, it ends, the shark's dead, the boat's destroyed, but, like, Amity Island, I want to say Amityville Island, Amity Island, which never was supposed to really have sharks in the first place, got a shark by accident, then now it's gone. And, they won't be in trouble anymore. So, like, maybe you didn't think a sequel was called for, which I guess I couldn't blame you. You might view it like, be like, oh, it's just them trying to, it's just a cash grab. They're just trying to piggyback on top of the success of Jaws. Well, because, like, really, I mean, I don't know, I think the script was conceived without a sequel in mind. So I don't know. That just didn't really necessarily call for one. And maybe you looked at the reviews, you saw one, and you're like, oh, I'm good. Also, I think a lot of people, I don't know, don't necessarily care for horror, which we talked about in the past, and then also creature horror, especially because I don't know. It just, I gotta say, Jaws is I've never been scared of sharks. Hey, easiest thing to avoid in the world, shark. Why? You just don't go in the water. Whereas a serial killer or a demon or whatever, they can get you anywhere. Demons are scarier and they're not even real. You know what I'm saying? Hey, easiest way to beat a shark, don't go in the water. It's like when you were a little kid and you're like, oh man, Michael Myers is in Illinois, so he's not going to come get me, I'm all the way over here. It's like that to the max, because it's oh, Jaws is in the water and I live in Idaho, so I'm landlocked. There's no way a shark is going to come and get me. It's impossible. So that's pretty. What am I? I don't even know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not everyone's cup of tea. Monster movies, shark attack movies. It's its own genre at this point. A subgenre in horror thriller is animal attacks and then shark attacks. Wikipedia actually has a whole Wikipedia page of that's a list of movies that feature killer sharks. Yeah, it's called Wikipedia is literally natural horror is a subgenre of horror that features natural forces, typically in the form of animals or plants. And there's a whole subsection of arachnids, birds, fish, which fish has piranha, and shark, which there's a bunch of shark movies actually. But where does orca fit into that? Wikipedia, because I don't see orca on here. Oh wait, maybe orca is in mammal? Oh yeah, there we go. Orca is under dolphin, which is a mammal. Interesting. Got me there, Wikipedia. But anywho, I watched this movie. Even though I said I own it on VHS and Laserdisc, I did not watch it on either of those because I had to keep pausing and playing over and over and over again to take notes. And neither of my DVD, or neither my VHS or my Laserdisc player have remotes. So it's a pain in the keister to have to keep doing that. So I just rented the DVD from my local library and watched it that way. Seems like I'm coming in really quiet today, and I don't know why. The mic is... I'm going to maybe... Oh, maybe... How's that? Is that better? See, it still seems like it's coming in really, really quietly, even though it's right near my face. How's this? Let me take it. Sorry, I don't mean to adjust the sound literally mid-pod, but I like to keep it on the desk, but if I keep it on the desk, it's kind of far from my face. See, now that's too loud. I don't know. Sorry. I shouldn't be doing this right now. Should have done some sort of mic check before I started like they do at concerts. But anyway, now I'm just holding it in my lap, and it is closer. So I'm sorry that you might have to, you the viewer, or the listener, I should say, will probably have to adjust your volume until I go back down again, which it seems like it's kind of doing randomly. So again, sorry for all the difficulties here. Alright, so I think I covered all the preliminary stuff. And now we can just get into the nitty-gritty of the movie 38 minutes into the podcast. Sorry. I'm just embellishing and padding this episode because I don't want to go. You know what I mean? I don't want the sequel summer to end, Summers always go by too quick, and this sequel summer definitely is not an exception to that rule. But yeah, we'll just do it. We'll jump right in to the water because it's Jaws. Anyway, yeah, it starts off, I don't know, my DVD copy started off, I played the DVD. Sorry, that's me drumming on the microphone. Sorry, it seems really loud for you. It started with that, have you guys ever seen that Universal logo? Where it's it's the Universal logo, and it's oh, it's spinning around the earth. But also, it's playing a montage of the Universal films that are being released that year. And it's da na 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 da 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 da, and there's dramatic music. That shit always gets me so hyped, dude. But yeah, this DVD must have been from like a Jaws 2 re-release in the 90s or something, because like the Nutty Professor 2 and a bunch of one of the Crow sequels and like a bunch of other, maybe not one of the Crow sequels, but like a Crow-esque film, a bunch of not very good movies were like da na 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 having The Family Man with Taya Leone, an all-star on this podcast, I guess. It's like you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Where the logo is being like intermingled with like a montage of the films being released by them that year to like this dope beat, and they do it all the time, and they're like, MGMA does it too, I've noticed a lot. But yeah, so that's what that started, and then it comes in with the like the old school like Universal and an MCMA company like logo, where it's like a shoddy special effect shot of the Earth that doesn't even look like it could ever be real. So we get hit with that, and then the opening credits of the movie begin underwater with like a lot of underwater shots of like fish and things. And it's over, and then we see that it's actually following these two scuba divers, and they're exploring a wreck of a ship, which actually turns out to be the Orca, which was the ship that they hunted the shark on in the original Jaws. That like it was Robert Shaw's Quint. It was Quint's boat called the Orca, which is ironic because orcas, killer whales, and carry with sharks have like an animosity towards each other, I guess. But yeah, so these two dudes are exploring the wreckage of the Orca. They're taking pictures with the wreckage. Which I gotta say, for whatever reason, the idea of like ships and like just structures sinking into the ocean and then just like being wreckage down there and kind of more or less preserved for all of time is so freaking interesting to me. Like I can't tell you how many like documentaries and books I read about the Titanic, and like I have this whole like National Geographic Special Edition magazine about like the history of them scuba diving, or not, of like doing deep sea dives to like the Titanic wreckage and like taking stuff and like taking pictures. And I know James Cameron is like really obsessed with that. He has like a documentary, and it's just like something about the idea of like stuff decaying down in the ocean is really cool, isn't it? I don't really understand why, but it's like it's so fascinating to me for some reason that it's like more or less preserved, and it's just like we can't get it out, so it's just down there. Like it's in another universe or something, or like on another planet, but it's like right here. But it's just like, yep, people's belongings just down there, you know. Like all of like Quint's old stuff is just on the bottom of the ocean, and someone in like 100 years will go down to that wreckage and have like be like, oh, whose boat could this possibly have been? Someone who died a really long time ago. Not that, you know, Quint's boat's a real boat, because it's not. But like, there's just something about that idea is really interesting to me. But yeah, the duo is taking pictures. Like literally, one of the guys is like flexing in front of the boat, which is weird. He's like, "Yeah, we found it," or whatever. And the duo is attacked by like a large shadowy being, a shark. It's cool, but it's cool though because you see like the shark's POV, and then it's like rolling through some weeds, and then it like descends upon the guy, and then it descends upon the other guy, and they're being eaten, they're thrashing around, getting thrown around by the shark. But the guy actually in fear like drops the camera, and the camera like continuously is taking shots, like, so it's basically kind of like taking pictures of the camera's owner being murdered. I don't know if that's how cameras work. Like, is there a way that like you can just be like, hey, keep taking pictures until, you know, like a setting? Is there a setting on a camera where if it accidentally gets pressed, it'll just keep taking pictures forever? Is that how cameras worked back then? Because that seems silly. But yeah, after this, the credit that says music by John Williams comes up, which is freaking awesome. Love that. But also there's a credit in the opening credits that is for the production designer, which is Joe Alves, which is actually really cool because Joe Alves ended up being the director of Jurassic Park 3D, or Jurassic Park 3D, of Jaws 3D. So I think he was the production designer on Jaws and Jaws 2. And then they're like, hey, why don't you direct this next one? And then, of course, he made like a shitty movie. But like, hey, it's pretty cool that he was with us the whole time and kind of worked his way up in the ranks, climbed the ladder. But yeah, we got Carl Gottlieb, which is cool. Love to see him returning. But yeah, so we cut to Scheider, and he's looking sharp. He's in like a tuxedo, and he's rolling along these Amity Island roads. He's going to he gets on one of those ferries that transports cars. They had it in the first one. He drives on. It's like a floating platform that you get on it. It takes you to another part of the island. He's going somewhere. He's obviously very late. But he arrives at the event, and it's like this huge. They're having this huge fanfare, and I guess it's for the opening of a Holiday Inn resort in Amity. Which is interesting because it's a Holiday Inn. Who cares? But they're having the high school band play. And it's like a ribbon cutting ceremony for a Holiday Inn. But hey, we all thought that the economy of Amity Island was going to be destroyed by the events of Jaws 1. So the fact that they're opening businesses in the second one means that Amity's still doing good. But yeah, Brody shows up and comes and sits by his wife. And say what you want about this movie, Roy Scheider and Lorraine Gary are two actors doing the best that they can. They're doing really, and I say that like they're doing bad. I don't know why, because they're really great. They're terrific. And they have this dynamic that is in the first one, and it's definitely present here as well. Because Lorraine Gary is just where have you been? And Roy Scheider's like, oh, late. And she's like, well, just pretend you've been here for a long time, okay? And he said, well, how do I do that? And she's like, act bored. And I'm like, huh, got me. But yeah, so then we quickly flash to little Mike. I don't know why I say little Mike Brody, because he's 18, but a teenage young adult Mike Brody, obviously, because it's 4 years later, and he was a kid in the last one. But he's at this event and he's with his friends, because a lot of the story is going to be from the friends' point of view. Not the friends, but Mike and his friends. There's a teenage element to the film, is what I'm saying. And they're all sitting around, they're drinking punch. And there's this curly haired, chunky character, and I don't want to say chunky in a mean way. I'm just describing him because he's like a Ham from the Sandlot archetype, where he's a loudmouth, fast talking guy that everyone actually really loves, but he's just kind of a little plump, And at one point, this character, whose name is Andy, who's I think one of my favorite characters in this movie, one of my favorite new characters introduced. He goes up to Mike and he's like, "Hey, Mike, did your mom make the punch?" And he's like, "Oh no." Well, because he's like, "Oh, your mom set up this whole event, huh?" Because I guess Ellen in this movie is working for this chairman of the board type guy who's a total asshole, and he becomes kind of the new Larry Vaughn, the skeptical, business oriented guy who was we can't do that. We can't shut down the beaches. It'll affect business. We're a beach town. We kill in the summers. It's when we make our money. So she set up this whole event, I guess. And then Andy's like, "Hey, did your mom set up this whole event?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, did she make the punch?" And he's like, "Oh no, someone else did." He's like, "Good, it's terrible." And he throws the punch back in the bowl. It's funny. But yeah, so then we cut to the sheriff's station the next day. And Deputy Jeff Hendricks, who was in the last movie, lovable, oafy kind of guy, doofy, comes back, and he and Scheider are, going about their daily biz as sheriff and as chief and deputy. What's the difference between a sheriff and a chief? Seems like it's the same thing, right? Why do we have so many words for the same position? But yeah, and Hendrix is like, hey, we discovered a boat out abandoned, which is the boat of the divers that got eaten in the opening sequence. So Hendrix is assigned to go check it out. And it's funny, there's this cute line where Hendrix gets on the boat, and there's this old random man that we have no idea who he is. He's on the boat. And so Scheider's like, hey, yeah, Hendrix, go check out the boat. I'll meet up with you later. And go take the old man in the sea with you. And then this old man gives Scheider like the shyest, sweetest little smile that I just thought was really funny. Because he's like, yes, I'm old and I like the sea. Funny, Scheider. And it's really just kind of cute. But yeah, so then, like, you know, the next day, there's a million shots and sequences of these kids, like these young teens, these young bucks, just sailing on the water and having a good time. Like, again, there's so many shots of these kids sailing and having a good time in this movie, especially like in this opening sequence, which is you know, we see them having like micro interactions, and we kind of get the idea of who the kids are. And there's like a scene of them sailing and getting their boats ready. It's long, and I don't know, like, it's one of those, I'm like, yeah, you could have edited this down, Swark. You really could have maybe not given us so many shots of these kids sailing their boats. But this movie really is like a Goonies Jaws hybrid mix or something, because there's this teenage element that, like, it works a lot of the time, but a lot of times they're really trying to force it, I think. And again, I guess you have to, because there's no Richard Dreyfuss, there's no Robert Shaw, and I mean, like, sure, Ellen Brody's there, but she doesn't have a lot of agency in this movie. And even though Larry Vaughn is in this movie, like Murray Hamilton's character as the mayor from the first one, he's not in a lot of it. You know, I think there were circumstances beyond, like, explaining that. But yeah, all the kid characters are introduced. I mean, there's Mike Brody, who played by what's his name? Rick Gruner, something like that. He's a very good-looking kid, thick head of hair, very, you know, late 70s hairstyle and dress, and he's like a cool kid, you know, suntanned. There's Mike, his friend Andy, with the the line about the punch. There's Tina Wilcox, who they mentioned earlier was like Miss Amity Island, and she cut the ribbon at the ceremony. There's her boyfriend Ed. There's Keith Gordon and his friend, who are like the stereotypical nerds who know how to sail, but like they sail, they're like the butt of all the jokes and stuff. And then there's this girl who has a cousin that she wants to set up Mike with. So there's this girl and cousin, and then there's Larry. There's Larry Vaughn Jr., which is the mayor's son, and his friend, who we don't know his name. There's a million kid characters. And I will say another like kind of minor flaw about this movie is that there's so many kid characters, and they don't really explain all their names, and they're all white and dressed kind of the same and have a similar hairstyle. So it is kind of hard to keep track of them, because literally Mike Brody and like Larry Jr. look very similar. And Larry Jr.'s friend also kind of looks like Mike. And then later there's this random guy that shows up that looks also exactly like Mike. So it's just like, there's so many of these teen characters introduced, and they're very kind of hard to keep straight. And again, there's this scene which is basically to serve as an introduction for these young bucks. But nothing really shark related happens to them. It's just setting the scene like, hey, these kids love spending time on the water, and there's rivalries and antagonisms and also little dramas and things going on in their lives, you know, because this is Fast Times at Ridgemont High or something, you know. But then we cut back to the police station, and Hendrix, you know, having gone and looked at that boat, deduces that it was like a couple people from Rhode Island, and they were tourists, and they were scuba diving, but they don't know what happened to them. We do, they died, but they can't tell that. They just found the boat abandoned, they towed it in, And then one of the a diver, like a local guy that they sanctioned to help look for these people, found the camera that had all these pictures. So Hendricks give Chief Brody this camera, but of course Chief Brody not yet isn't really thinking anything of it, you know. Even though he should, because the next scene, the shark is seen stalking a water skier, and we know it because there's like the fin is popping in and out of the water, and there's like the donna donna donna, and there's a lot of stuff going on. You know, we see a semblance of fun being had. We see, you know, the people. There's a girl driving the boat, screaming. Girls behind her on the little flipper or whatever, the board, a boogie board. What is it? What are they on? If they're if like they're, you know, they're water skiing. Is it a ski? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a ski, Jace. Anyway. Sorry, my father is mowing the lawn and it's very loud outside, but again, I cannot close the window, so hopefully you can just bear with me on this one. Please, sir. Today of all days. Anyway, but yeah, so they have an audience too, because Tina Wilcox and her boyfriend Eddie are up on the hill making out, and there's an old woman watching from her porch. So there's going to be plenty around to see if anything happens. And believe me, this peaceful, fun summer day in Amity Island is about to take a turn for the worse, because the shark literally bites the ski and causes this woman, like, you see the shark's pursuit and you see it from like the shark POV, and it's like coming up, swimming up, and it bites the boogie board, even though I just called it a ski and I know it's a ski, and causes the lady to wipe out. And as she's floating in the water and the girl sees and she's coming back for her, she gets yomped down, bro. She just gets bit, and sucked down, and she's never seen from again. So then the girl's looking around in the boat once she's come back. And she's like, where's my friend? All I see is this broken, busted up ski. And then, you know, bango, here comes the shark, rearing its ugly head right through the side of the boat, literally bursting into this, and this is a tiny boat, bursting through the side of the boat, and this girl's of course panicking because the shark is obviously trying to eat her. And in what is actually kind of a silly sequence visually, the girl lifts up a thing of gasoline that's on the boat for some reason and tries to pour it on the shark, but ends up accidentally pouring it all over herself. And the shark of course is continuing to munch on the side of the boat. But the girl, in a panic, then takes out a flare gun and attempts to shoot the shark, and she does, but then it like lights the entire boat on fire. And then the boat explodes, killing the girl, sinking the boat, but also scarring the shark's face, because you see the shark actually kind of start to freak out. And like it has like, it's like, because the half side of its face is on fire, which actually for the rest of the movie creates this like really badass looking scar that kind of distinguishes this shark from the last shark. But yeah, and of course the whole thing, I mean, this boat blowing up is witnessed by Ed and Tina and this old porch lady, and also the explosion effect is very awesome. I mean, they had to have used like real explosive, looks really authentic. But yeah, we then cut to Hendricks and the old man in the sea, dragging in the water there, because you know, Scheider's telling them, hey, we got to find this body. The witnesses here told us that there were 2 people on this boat and we can't find either corpse. And, you know, a little Easter egg for later, while Hendricks and the old man are out there like skimming the bottom of the ocean for the corpse, they actually come across a power line. And they get hooked on a power line. They're like, hey, throw that back in there, we're going to electrocute it. Keep that in mind for later. But yeah, they're unable to find the body. But Scheider thinks it's, you know, something about the situation doesn't strike him as right. I mean, the last time they had like spontaneous, unexplained deaths like this was due to a shark, and you know, something must have caused that boat to explode. And, even if it was just an explosion, where are the bodies? So Scheider is, he's thinking. There's a lot of quiet moments of him looking off into the sunset, and people are like, Chief Brody, can we go? Chief Brody, can we go? And he's just kind of staring because he knows something's afoot. But later on, Mike and his pals are on the beach again, hanging out, vibing, going to the lighthouse, and they actually come across a dead orca, washed up on the beach, and there's this huge bite taken out of it, and the orca, I don't know if it's a prosthetic or what. I hope to God that it's not an actual orca corpse, because it looks so authentic, it looks so real, that I have to know what they used. But yeah, and then there's an ensuing investigation. Brody's there. There's a coroner, and from the looks of the bites, Brody thinks that it's a shark. And combined with the events of yesterday with the exploding boat, he thinks something's up, man. I've went through this kind of shite before, and he's talking to the medical examiner lady, and he's like, is this a shark bite? What's the bite radius? And she's like, yeah, I don't know, nothing's conclusive yet. And this local expert lady is definitely unconvinced, but Scheider seems he seems totally convinced that it's a shark, for whatever reason. But the lady's like, yeah, any number of things could have done this. This shark could have been, or this orca could have died and then, floated here. It could have come from as far as 15 miles away, and then all these bites are, could have been taken out by other animals 10 miles away. We don't know if there's a shark in this area. Nothing is for sure. So I don't want to jump to conclusions, Scheide, okay? She's like, yeah, I'm actually getting kind of annoyed by him. And it's funny, she's such a hard sell. And given the events of the last movie, I don't know why it would be so far out of the question for people. I will say, and I'm sorry to do this again, even though I just did it. Another small flaw in this movie is that no one believes Scheider. No one believes Chief Brody about this possibly being a shark. No one wants to entertain his theories about it being a shark. Not this coroner lady, not the mayor, not Len Peterson, the chairman of the board type dude who's opening the Holiday Inn. No one wants to believe it's a shark, but they have every precedent in the world to believe that it is, considering that 4 years ago you guys literally had a great white shark problem. That was a very public thing that happened. But this lady, maybe she didn't work, she's like, oh, I just got a job as the coroner last week, I have no clue. But she's a hard sell for this being a shark. It's actually funny though, because Chief Brody at one point asks, he's like, hey, sharks can communicate, right? And if a shark was killed in this area, could it have communicated to another shark and maybe they come to get revenge? And the coroner lady's like, yeah, sharks don't take things personally, so that's impossible. Which is really funny, because literally the plot of Jaws the Revenge is that the shark is somehow related to these first two sharks that is getting revenge on the Brody family, and the tagline of the movie is literally, this time it's personal. So it literally it's literally running counter to it's the exact opposite of what this lady is saying. And yeah, speaking of people being skeptical and not believing Brody, literally after this scene, there's another scene where Chief Brody goes to Mayor Larry Vaughn and is like, hey, we've had this weird string of disappearances. We didn't find those bodies from the boating accident. We didn't find the bodies of those divers. No one has come to claim that boat. And now we have this dead orca with these giant bites taken out of it. I think there might be a shark. And it's bordering on absurdity, that the mayor has nothing to do with it. He's like, yeah, listen, you gave me a lot of hell about this shark a couple years ago. I don't want to hear it again. There's no way there's another shark. This is not good for publicity. He's literally giving the exact same spiel he gave in Jaws 1, even though he was proven at the end of Jaws 1 to be wrong. Literally, why wouldn't you believe this guy after what just happened 4 years ago? You literally gave him this exact spiel, and this exact rationale for how there couldn't possibly be a shark despite all the evidence, and it turned out there was a shark. So now you're literally going to go through the exact same thing again. Interestingly enough, though, there actually was a deleted scene from this movie later on, where it is revealed that like Larry Vaughn did believe Martin about Chief Brody about there being a shark, but it was cut. For what reason, I have no clue, because there's a million other things you could have cut about this movie, but you could have kept that one in, because it actually makes no logical sense. Like, literally, this guy ended up being right the first time, so you think you'd believe this guy about everything for the rest of your natural life, especially if it has something to do with sharks. But anyway, Brody goes patrolling in his like little police car. Even though I don't know why I'm saying a little police car, because it's literally a Ford Bronco, which is like a huge SUV. But he goes patrolling, and he sees like he's clearing his head. He's like, man, don't know if there's a shark or not, but we gotta, the evidence is piling up, and we gotta find explanations for this stuff. But he's driving near the water, patrolling, and he sees what looks like a part of a boat, a part of like the destroyed boat from earlier in the explosion. So he goes and investigates, and he like waddles into the wads into the water to get a look at this like piece of like all this broken undercarriage of a boat. And the waves are like battering it and washing it to shore, and by the time he gets to like the actual piece of the boat, a wave hits, and the wave like basically throws a corpse at him. Like, it's actually it got me. I jumped this time when I saw it, because this charred corpse is like caught in like the wreckage, the piece of wreckage from this boat, and like it's thrown at Brody, and it lands on top of him. But it's like, hey, here's the body, here's the charred corpse of this woman. Even though, of course, no, the other corpse isn't to be found because it was eaten by the shark. So, at least they got one body down. And there's a pretty neat scene. And, the pieces are kind of starting to come together. Brody at this point tries to contact Matt Hooper, which is Richard Dreyfuss's character from the first movie, to no avail. Because Richard Dreyfuss, of course, just didn't want to return for this movie. And they thought about recasting, but they decided against it. So in this movie, he's just off in Antarctica on like another like research trip, which actually does make sense, because in the first movie, he had declined going on a trip to the Antarctic to study this shark. So for him to be there now and to be unreachable kind of does make sense. And meanwhile, we catch up with the teens. Because at this point, Chief Brody, paranoid about the shark, has like grounded his son. He's like, hey, I don't want you going out in the water anymore. I don't want you taking your boat out. I want you to get a job. I want you to stay away from the water because something's going on. And because Mike can't use his boat, and has been forced to get a job working for like the city of Amity, painting structures at the beach and lifeguard towers and stuff. He's all butthurt, and like his girlfriend, the girl, she's like, oh, I'll set you up with my cousin. I mentioned that earlier. Has actually been snaked by Larry Jr. And they're all at the beach, and Mike Brody is sitting there painting like an outhouse, and he's pissed because he sees his gal, whose name is Jackie, I think, with like Larry Jr., like the mayor's son. So he's mad. So Mike is mad at his dad for like inadvertently causing that to happen. But yeah, so this next scene where we find all this kid drama out, which I don't know, does this kid drama need to be in the movie? Who knows? But yeah, so they're all at the beach, and Brody is up in the tower. Like there's like since the last movie, they've installed like this giant tower so as to look out for sharks and to just look out for like people at the beach. It's like a lifeguard tower, but it's like massive. And Brody is looking. It's like keeping watch at the tower on this fine day. But this is the day where Mayor Vaughn and Chairman of the Board Len Peterson are bringing potential investors around to take a look at the island and at the beach. So Larry, Vaughn, and Peterson are super pissed that Brody is up in the tower, because I guess it's going to make them look bad, and people are going to ask questions about why he's up there, and it's just really weird. And they're like preternaturally, like weirdly so mad at Brody for like trying to do his job and protect citizens. Yeah, and it's at this point where Brody's paranoia gets the better of him, because up in the guard tower, he sees like a school of bluefish, and he thinks it's a shark because it's like this massive dark shape swimming towards the shore. So he like blows a whistle, rings a bell, orders everyone out of the water right in front of these potential investors, and he descends down this like the ladder and starts just opening fire at this school of bluefish. And then when it's revealed to not be a shark, he looks like a total idiot, and like he's like embarrassed himself, and like, you know, made the investors obviously very scared, and they're probably not going to want to invest here. And like everyone is of course like panicking and scaring because this guy's shooting off a gun. So this is like Brody was like, no one believed him about the shark anyway, and has been telling him to can it with the shark stuff, and now this, and like you know, obviously he's just going too far. It's actually cute though, because there's this moment right after Brody, like everyone is literally like so shocked that he did this, and they all like in unison almost would like turn their backs on him and walk away, except for like his little son Sean, who comes and helps him pick up, who like comes over to him as he's picking up the bullet casings in shame, and he like helps him pick up the bullets, and he's like, "Here, Dad," and they hug, and it's actually really sweet. But yeah, during this time though, the camera from the divers has been developed, and it has yielded pictures, and Brody goes down to the guy's like red room, and as the picture is developing, Brody's like, oh my gosh, like one of the pictures is like of a shark's eye, and like a shark's like kind of like the corner of his mouth, because obviously it got some pictures of the shark, because it kept snapping pics after the guy dropped it, and it literally was facing the guy as he's being like eaten and swarmed by the shark. So Brody thinks, hey, this is all the evidence I need. I mean, there's a picture of a shark's eye, and it's like close up, so you know, if you know what a shark looks like, you can tell. But like, as we will soon find out, it's also very easy to deny. And there's this cool kind of drama to the scene where like Brody is watching the picture develop, and everything's like dimly lit in red, and he's watching it as it develops into an eye of a shark. It's pretty cool. But yeah, Brody takes his evidence to the council. But they're actually already having, like, Larry's there, Len Peterson, and a bunch of other people are having a meeting at town hall. And Martin is like, here, you may think I'm crazy, but look at this picture of the shark. And they all reject him. They're like, that doesn't look like anything. That could be a smudge on the lens. Like, literally, this Len Peterson guy is such an asshole. And he's like, that's nothing, Brody. You're crazy. You can't be reasoned with. You're out of control. And then Mayor Vaughn is like, I don't know if it's a shark or not. But listen, Martin, if you'll excuse us, we're going to go talk about this real quick. But they reject him, and they promptly, once returning, fire him. So they relieve him of his duties as chief because he refuses to let it go about the shark. And then Brody comes home and proceeds to get sloshed on Jack Daniels, on Jackie D, as he will, because he just got canned. But yeah, and then like Brody is obviously already tied one on. You know, we see him come home to his wife, and then Deputy Hendricks is there, and Deputy Hendricks is like, hey, where's your husband? I heard he got relieved of his duty. And then, like, in struts a drunk Roy Scheider, and he's like, "Hey, Hendrix, you're here. You're the new chief. Hail to the chief." Dun, 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 dun. And, like, Brody's, like, poking fun at and, like, teasing Hendrix, and, like, his wife's like, "Hey, knock it off." And he's like, "Listen, Jeff, I know it's not your fault. You're only doing what you're supposed to do, and I wish you all the best of luck. You're a great cop." And then like, Hendrix is like, "I only came here because I'd heard the news and I couldn't believe it, and I just think you're the best, Chief." And they, like, embrace, and it's kind of actually a nice moment. And Brody, like, wishes him luck, like, with the council and the mayor and stuff, because he's like, "Listen, they didn't believe me about the shark. They only see what they want to see, but something's gonna happen, And meanwhile, while this is going on, there's a scene at, like, a local bar, because I guess I forgot at this stage in, like, American history, if you're 18 you can drink. So, like, Mike Brody and all of his cronies and friends are at this bar, which, at watching it, I was like, these are kids, aren't they, like, 16? Why are they at this bar drinking, this, like, shady seaside shanty bar? And I'm like, oh, they're like 18, so they can drink. But it's at this bar where this girl who Mike's friend was trying to set him up with convinces Mike to disobey his parents and take the boat out the next morning. So this, even though we know there's a shark out there, no one else believes anybody. So, and Mike Brody, I guess, just really wants to get laid. So, and this girl is such a little conniving, like, little asshole, and she's, like, teasing Mike, like, "Oh, do you always do what your parents tell you to do? Come on, bring your boat out to the lighthouse in the morning." And I'm just like, listen, man, there's nothing wrong with obeying your parents, all right? Why are you trying to, like, lead Mike Brody astray? Like, who are you? You're just some gal that he just met. But evidently Mike's gonna take the boat out, dude. And then next scene, we see Mike sneak out while his father sleeps off the hangover. But while he's sneaking out, the little brother Sean wakes up, and Sean is like, "Hey, I'll scream right now if you refuse to take me with you. So if you take me with you because you're going sailing and I want to go, then Dad doesn't have to know about this." So now both the Brody boys are going out in the water when there's a shark out there, which definitely just, I smell trouble brewing. And then we catch up with the kids, Also, these kids agree to meet at 8 a.m. to go sailing. Like, first of all, what group of 18-year-olds is getting up at 8 a.m. to go sailing? Maybe, I guess it was 1978, maybe it was a different time. Maybe, like, sleeping until 7:30 and going out at 8, it was, like, sleeping in for them. Because it was a different time, it might as well have been 100 years ago. But, like, even still, if I said to any of my friends nowadays, I'm like, "Hey, let's go to the beach, but let's go at 8 a.m. They would, like, tell me to go screw." But yeah, so we catch up with these kids, the whole crew's there, and then many more kids that we don't know. And there's there's Andy and Mike and this girl, Jackie, in one boat, and then Sean, Mike's little brother, is like Mike's like, "Hey, you're crapping my style, beat it." And then he's like, "But I want to go sailing." And then this random girl comes in and she's like, "I'll take him." And Mike's like, "Okay, cool." And we have no idea who this girl is. She has not been introduced thus far. But then Jackie's cousin, who is Mike's friend, is like, "Oh, there's not enough room in the boat for me." And then Keith Gordon's nerd friend is like, "Here, you can come with me and Keith Gordon. I like you. This is a subplot." And she's like, "Oh, okay, fine." So that girl goes with the nerds. And then there's also Larry Jr. and his friend. And Larry Jr. is obviously super pissed because he really was also trying to get with this girl, Jackie. And it's funny because his friend, Larry Jr.'s friend, is like, "Hey, man, do you want to talk about it? You seem upset," which I just thought was a really weird interaction. And then Larry's like, "You want to swim? Oh, do I want to talk about it? Do you want to swim home, bud? Just drop it." And we're like, "Oh, man, someone's sensitive." But yeah, so we see Mike and his gang of infinitely growing number of teenagers. We see them take their boats out and they're sailing and they're having a good time. Again, there's too much footage of them sailing and having a good time. This is a thriller movie. And they pass this boat full of like scuba divers, one of which is actually the guy Tom Andrews who found the camera earlier, it is revealed. But he's like, all right, let's dive. And there's too many shots of Amity Island people having fun. I don't know. But yeah, so these scuba divers dive down and they're exploring the ocean. There's a lot of beautiful ocean shots. They're trying to catch crab and lobster. So there's just a lot of footage of them trying to catch those, sea creatures. Again, too many shots and sequences of them trying to catch, because again, this is a thriller movie. But, it's very peaceful, very serene. And I see what they're doing because they're trying to set a tone. Because then, bam, all of a sudden, the shark descends upon this guy, Tom Andrews. And Tom Andrews manages to avoid its bite, but he swims up to the surface too quick, and this causes, like, an embolism. So this dude's, like, bleeding out of his mouth and nose because he surfaced too fast, and his, like, equilibrium inside of his brain and, like, his organs is, like, all effed up. It's cool, though, because we see the shark come at him through the seaweed, and you see the scarred and, like, burned half of the shark's face. It's pretty neat. But yeah, it looks really cool. But then after this, we see the shark kind of veer off, and then it hears all the noise that the Brody bunch play on the Brady bunch. The Brody bunch is making, and he starts to, we see his fin surface and then go back under the water. But hey, it's heading for Mike Brody. Oh no! But yeah, it's at this point with like Brody getting fired and like all of these sequences of like the teens having fun and like the scuba diver stuff, like, and where the scuba diver, he doesn't even get killed, where it's like, man, no one's gotten killed for a super long time. I'm kind of I'm almost checking out. I'm almost getting bored. But it's at this moment that like it really starts to heat up. Like I said earlier, it really tests you. And meanwhile, we see Chief Brody. He's just going about his daily life as an unemployed man. Excuse me. He gives his wife a ride to work. It's funny though too, because he's wearing like this military bomber type jacket, and he's wearing like these really short shorts with like these boat shoes, and it's like, oh, I guess this is what his casual wear looks like. But it's funny just because like the shorts are like maybe like 4-inch inseam or something. They're super short, and I guess it's like island wear, but it's like kind of how shorts are starting to look nowadays, which I just think is interesting. But yeah, so we see the teens, and we see teens, Tina Wilcox, Miss Amity Island, and her boyfriend Eddie. We see that their boat has kind of got left behind by the others, and we close in on them, and they're like talking, laughing, having fun. And Tina's like, "Hey, don't we want to catch up to the others?" And Eddie's like, "No, I'm good. I kind of just wanted to have some privacy." And it's like, oh, this dude is obviously trying to get himself a piece, trying to get himself some action. Trying to do the nasty. So he's laying out a blanket and stuff, and they start kissing, but then the shark, like, we see the shark bum rush the boat, and it just, a lot of the shark attacks in this movie are just the shark straight up ramming into the boat, which I think is just cool. It's like, I have teeth and I can't kill you, but I'm just going to straight up ram you, because I'm a force, I am what's to be reckoned with in this ocean. I am the immovable object. I am the predator of the ocean, so nothing can stop me. If I see anything, I'm just going to ram you. So he rams the boat, and it knocks Eddie off into the water. And this sequence is just really, really, really awesome and suspenseful and tense. Definitely like a runner-up, I think, for maybe like the third runner-up for the best sequence in the movie. So just when you start to get bored, this Jaws 2 really comes and hits you. Because Eddie is knocked in the water, and like he's like disoriented, and he's like kind of floating, and the boat starts to like float away from him. So there's maybe like 30 feet between Tina screaming at Eddie and Eddie just floating in the water. But like like 20, like 30 feet, 50 feet on the other side of the boat, we see the shark turn around and start heading back. And Tina sees this, and she's like calling for Eddie. She's like, Eddie, come on, you need to swim. You need to get on the boat before the shark gets here. Come on, Eddie, you need to swim. And Eddie starts swimming. And he's like trying to swim back to the boat, but the shark is too quick, and he goes underneath the boat, out the other side, just as Eddie is about to get to the boat, and just drags him down. Despite Tina's pleading and begging that he comes, and that he gets on the boat quicker, he just gets sucked under anyway, right in front of her. But then like he manages to like resurface, and he grabs the side of the boat, and he's like, Tina, please help me, grab my hand. And he's all covered in blood and stuff, and then swoosh, right back under he goes. And then it's just silent, and it's like, wow, that was great, that was really well done. And I mean, like, this poor girl, Tina, just like literally was like this close to saving her boyfriend, only to see him get like eaten alive right in front of her. It's really, really kind of harrowing stuff. But meanwhile on the shore, Brody, about to drop off. Oh, thank you. My mom just had to let my cat out of my room because he was pawing at the door. He had since woken up and wanted out, apparently. Sorry, I know I just got like way louder for some reason. But yeah, so Brody, on his way to drop off Ellen at work, because he's unemployed, stay-at-home dad now, he sees an ambulance rushing to the beach, and he follows it. And once he gets there, he sees that Tom Andrews is being loaded up into the ambulance. And he's like, hey, what happened? What happened to Tom? And they're like, oh man, he come up really quick, got an embolism. He's gonna be fine, but he can't talk or explain what happened to him. And then one of the divers is like, yeah, something must have spooked him. I've never seen Tom act like that in my whole life. He's an expert diver. He would never do that. Something must have really, really scared him because he came up quick. And Brody's like, it's gotta be a shark. Obviously, it's pointing to a shark. So then Brody is like, hey, Hendrix, what's going on? Where was Tom Andrews at? There's a shark over there. And he's like, yeah, he was right over in the bay, right by where Mike and all those kids were. And he's like, wait, Mike is out there on the ocean, even though I told him not to? We gotta get the hell out of here. We gotta get on a boat and go. And it's funny because Hendrix is like, hey, I can't let you take out the police boat. You're not a policeman anymore, Brody. But then Brody's like, come on, he's my kid or whatever. And Hendrix is like, what the hell? They can't fire us both. Let's go. And also Brody doesn't really even know how to drive a boat. So Hendrix and Ellen and Chief Brody all head out on the ocean to try to rescue Mike. Because they're like, oh man, he's definitely in danger. And we see them take off, and then eventually they encounter like Tina and Eddie's abandoned boat, and Tina's in there and she's like traumatized, she's like curled up in like the fetal position and she's crying, and she's like, and when Chief Brody and Ellen board the little boat, she's like all over them, like hugging them and crying and sobbing, and she's actually given a pretty good performance until she utters this line where she goes, it was a shark, and it's like really corny as hell to see, but it's just like Brody's like, I knew there was a shark. So they hail like a passing cruiser boat, and Hendrix and Ellen take Tina and they take them back to shore, and they go back to shore, and then Brody takes the police boat and goes off alone to try to find Mike. Meanwhile, the shark has caught up with the teens who are having a good time, but the shark attacks Keith Gordon's boat, sinking it, and then he attacks Mike's boat and knocks it over, and then in the process Mike is knocked unconscious when he hits his head. And it's there's this huge disarray, and people are screaming, and there's total utter chaos and confusion. And in that confusion, Larry Jr. and Keith Gordon accidentally crash their boats into each other, and somehow the boats and the all the sailboats come together into this giant sailboat smashed together island where they're all on top of each other. It's kind of actually like a neat sequence because it all happens so fast, but it is believable. Like in like just like the amount of like confusing, you know, intensity and like pure just adrenaline that's going on. Like these teens are like freaking the fuck out, and like in doing so they like crash their boats into each other, and they get all like lodged. Like Keith Gordon crashes his boat into the side of Larry Jr.'s boat, and it like goes right through the hole, like goes right through the side, and it like gets stuck. So these teens are like all like stuck together on these boats that won't move now. And Sean and the other teen, who the rando girl that he went with, whose actually name is Marge, their boat gets flipped over, and then they have to climb on top of their boat and are like huddled together on top of it. And Mike, who's just floating unconscious in the water, is almost eaten. But Timmy, which is Keith Gordon's nerd friend, and another random guy that we've never been introduced before and has never spoken, they managed to pull Mike back, like up by his life jacket, back on their boat before the shark like swoops in and almost eats him. And like this shark side swipe is actually pretty cool because the shark comes out of the water and is literally this close to getting Mike, and you see like, you know, the scar and the mouth wide open with all the teeth, and it looks pretty gnarly. The shark, contrary, you know, in contradiction, I don't know how it does, you know, one of the huge differences between this movie and Jaws 1 is that the shark is on full display in this movie. They must have obviously had like an updated mechanical shark, because this one is working. It's working overtime. It's exposed and out of the water all the time, which I think a lot of people say that it does this movie a disservice, but I disagree. I think the shark looks cool enough and it looks scary enough to where, you know, if you show it enough times, to where like you showing it doesn't really necessarily take away from the horror of it. Just like in Halloween, I mean, like, you know, they don't really shy away from showing Michael Myers, but that doesn't mean it's not like tense and like suspenseful. But yeah, so Timmy, so like the kids regroup and they all like pull their boats together and like form this floating island of dilapidated boats. Except for like Timmy, the nerd, and the random guy, who are like free to sail because their boat has been unaffected. So they agree to take Mike in because Mike is like, you know, unconscious and he's losing a lot of blood. So they agree to take Mike in because the shark is seemingly kind of left for a while. It's like leaving him alone for a sec. So then this leaves Andy, Jackie, Keith Gordon, Larry Jr., Larry Jr.'s friend, Jackie's cousin, whose name is Brooke, and then Marge and Sean on top of their overturned boat. And these kids, I mean, they're just stranded. None of their boats really work. And it's kind of like, it is kind of spooky and eerie. Like, because there's like a quiet moment where like wordlessly it just flashes to each of the kids' like terrified faces. And you realize you're like, oh man, these kids are really stranded. I mean, these kids are totally effed. Until they can get help. I mean, they're sitting ducks out here. And of course it begs the question, like, I don't know, like, I understand that like Mike is, like, he's bleeding profusely, and if those guys can get away, you know, go for it. But like, I don't know, like, why you would take Mike out of the equation, being that Mike is like our attachment to Roy Scheider, who's our main character. So he's like the only one we know really out here, I guess, except for Sean. But like, to take him away, I don't know, kind of like, I don't really know how much we care about these other kids and like if they die or not. I think leaving Mike out there would have made just as much sense, you know. And like, there's this scene later on where like Brody encounters the nerd and the random guy with Mike, and Mike's like, oh my god, Sean is still out there, Dad, you gotta help him. And then your dad's like, okay, get back to the island, get yourself some help. And then we don't see Mike again. So I don't really understand the choice to take Mike out of the equation basically for the rest of the movie here. Like, it would have been, I think, twice as suspenseful and tense if Brody had to save both of his children rather than just one. And especially, like I said, if Mike literally never comes back. Okay, and so this whole time, Chief Brody on the boat that he, on the police boat, has been communicating with Harbor Patrol, who they have a chopper out looking for the kids. So it's at this point that the chopper like lands and is like, arrives at the kids, and he like lands in the water near them. And he like throws them and they like throw him a rope, and he's like, okay, I'm going to tow you guys to Cable Junction. You're safe now. You're rescued. It's okay. And all the kids are cheering, and it's like a nice moment. And the helicopter pilot starts to like, he starts the propellers, and the chopper starts to lift off the ground. And you think the kids, you think they're saved. You think, oh, okay, they're just going to get towed to Cable Junction. There's an adult here now. They're good. Everything is copacetic now. I don't have to worry about these kids getting systematically picked apart and eaten by this shark, because literally they're just like floating on boards, basically. Like, this shark is like the size of their whole boat thing. So he could just burst through the middle and eat them at any point. So you're feeling for these kids, and you're like, oh, thank God. This guy's going to tow him to safety. Freaking sweet. But lo and behold, just as the chopper starts to lift off the water a little bit, the shark pops out of nowhere and latches on to like the landing gear of the chopper. You know how like there's like both sides of the chopper have like legs, and they like, you know what I'm talking about. And then like the chopper, like the shark like latches onto the chopper, and the shark of course is massive. So the shark just drags the chopper, that side of the chopper underneath, and it's like, oh man, it starts to sinking into the water, and the propellers are hitting the water at super speed, and the propellers are breaking off, and they're flying into the sails of the kids' boats, like further immobilizing them, because now they can't even sail or move at all. And then the chopper's flipped upside down, and the shark just drags it underwater. Like, this is definitely in the running for best sequence for sure. Seeing this chopper dragged underwater, it's so awesome. Like, literally there's like a 30-minute portion of this movie where nothing is happening, and now for like starting like when the shark attacks the kids for the first time to the rest of the movie, shit is always happening in this movie. Like, literally the shark just knocked out Mike Brody and knocked a bunch of kids to the water and almost killed Mike and almost killed Keith Gordon, and then 2 seconds later it's like killing and attacking this chopper helicopter pilot. But yeah, and also the helicopter pilot had this really, really weird thick chin strap beard, and it's like obviously like purposefully shaved like this. It looks totally insane, because it's like not even a classical chin strap, because it's like an inch thick just all around this guy's chin. It's really bizarre. But yeah, it's at this point too where the shark, after like, destroying the chopper, starts going for the kids again, and it manages to knock Sean into the water because he hits their boat. But Marge, even though I insulted her for being a rando earlier, saves the day, because she jumps in and she basically sacrifices herself to save Sean, because she jumps in to get Sean, and she like pushes Sean back on top of the boat, but is unable to get back on top of the boat herself, and is like sucked down and eaten alive by the shark right in front of Sean, which is really kind of scary. Children go through a lot of trauma in this movie. But yeah, and then the group, even though Sean is like traumatized and he doesn't feel like moving, Andy and the group manage to like coax him over, and they like pull Sean aboard their boat, so at least everyone is like on sort of stable ground now. And it's really cute though too, because like Andy is like, Sean, catch the rope, Sean, you better look at me, Sean. And then he grabs Sean and pulls him aboard, and he like holds Sean tight, and he's just like, hey bud, you okay? You okay, bud? Like it's his own son or something, and he gives Sean a kiss on the head. It's really, really sweet. So the kids actually managed to like steer themselves over to this place, to Cable Junction, that's been referenced a few times now. It's like a floating, it's like an island that has like, it's kind of dilapidated, has like broken docks on it, and it has like a old abandoned like looks like a radio tower thing almost. But the kids managed to float near almost to Cable Junction before they get like the, because like one of the boats, okay, sorry, it's hard to describe, but like one of the boats gets like flipped, and but it's still connected to like the rest of the boats because they crashed all into each other. So then the sails of this boat are like upside down, like going into the water, and it's, you know, they're like 20 feet tall, and they like snag on some rocks. So the kids can't actually make it to Cable Junction because they're stuck on the rocks as the water gets shallower as they approach the island. So they're like maybe 35 feet from Cable Junction, but they just can't get there. But like as they realize that they're stuck, luckily Martin Brody arrives. But unluckily, so does the shark. And Brody, an inexperienced boater, accidentally crashes the boat in confusion when the shark attacks him. So Brody, like just as you think he's like, hey kids, give me a tow, I'll tow you over to Cable Junction and then we can wait for help, gets attacked by the shark, and like literally like the shark like takes the boat out of the equation instantly. But like then Brody's like, hey, I'll use the motor, like the tower skimmer thing on this boat. Sorry, I don't have a lot of nautical knowledge. If I throw you this rope and I attach this to my skimmer, I can pull you out and I can pull you over to Cable Junction. And Brody like throws the line over to them, but the line actually, like when he's towing it back over, gets caught on a power line, and it accidentally like lifts up a power line to the surface. And Brody's like, oh no, dang it, that was my plan, and now I can't get you kids over here. And it's at this point that the shark does what it should have done the whole time, and it bursts up through like the material balsa wood center of this mass of children's sailboats, and just starts wreaking havoc on these kids. Like the shark literally bursts up through the middle, and these kids are flailing, they're freaking out, they're all like thrown into the water basically. And one of the randos, who like literally we had no idea who she was until this point, is accidentally like the teeth of the shark graze her and it bloodies her up. And they're like, "No, my God, no, Lucy!" And I'm like, "Who the hell's Lucy?" And she's bitten by the shark, but she and everyone pretty much successfully are able to swim to Cable Junction, except for Sean and the girl Jackie, because they're too immobilized by fear to do anything. And Jackie, by the way, that's the one that Mike was trying to get set up with. She's like, for some reason, she's been freaking out more than everyone else the whole time, even though that's not explained. Maybe she has some PTSD with water or something, but she's been freaking out the whole time, even to the point where Larry Jr. was just like, hey, can you calm down? We're all in the exact same situation, and you're acting really way more scared than all the rest of us, and it's really freaking everybody out. But yeah, so she and Sean are stranded on the middle of this, this tiny patch of dilapidated boat that's left over. And the shark is like gunning for them, you know, it's tearing its way through the rest of their makeshift boat island to try to get to them. But Brody, you know, quick thinker that he is, sees the power line, and takes a little like the police boat has a little like has a little flotation device that he blows up, and he paddles out to the power line, which is just hanging out of the water like a foot and a half like above the water, sticking out, and he starts beating the line with the oar. And this is actually a callback to something I didn't say earlier, that the coroner said. Remember when the coroner was talking to Brody at the site of the beached orca? She was like, yes, sharks are attracted by like repeated like sonic vibrations. So if it hears a sound being repeated over and over again, it's going to be attracted to that. So Brody starts beating on the power line with the oar to try to attract the shark's attention using his newfound knowledge. And then the shark like turns and like leaves the kids alone and starts charging towards the sound, starts charging towards Brody and the power line. So then we see what Brody's cooking up. We see that he's going to try to stick the power line in the shark's open mouth. And all the kids are like, Brody, Chief, get out of the way. Chief, get out of the way. The shark's coming. Chief, look out. But Brody's like, no, man, I got to wait till the last possible second because I got to wait till it opens its jaws to bite me, to stick this power line in its mouth and fry its frickin' brains. And that's exactly what he does, baby. At the last possible second, he jumps out of the way and the shark... Well, and it's funny, too, because he has to have a good line. Because in Jaws 1, he had the line of, smile, you son of a bitch. And in this one, he's like, come on, baby. Come on, shark. Open wide. Say, ah. And he jumps out of the way. And the shark bites down on the power line and just gets freaking smoked, dude. Like, the shark is electrocuted in such a way. And I guess I actually found out in my research that they actually did just like, hey, let's just fry the animatronic. Who cares? They're like, well, what if we need it for other shoots? They said, no, just fry it. Just literally actually electrocute the thing. And so it looks really real. I mean, there's like fire pouring out of the shark's mouth, like smoke billowing out of its eyes, and the flesh is like burning and on fire. It's tight. But yeah, so the shark gets electrocuted and it dies, and it sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And then Brody collects Sean and Jackie from their, from their floating, shards of boat. And then, he drives them over to reunite on, Cable Junction to wait for help. And then the movie's over. That's it. It's a super abrupt 1970s ending, baby. And there we have it, And I will say right away that I think the best scene in this movie is definitely that ending, which is, that's how you know a good action movie, a good action thriller, is when, like, the third act is, like, where they get you. Because literally a super boring second act of this movie. Like, in the first act, there's that whole boating accident, and then the killer whale washes up on the shore, and then there's a long time where nothing really exciting happens. And then the third act is literally bang, 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 culminating in the awesome shark electrocution, which I actually think is almost as good of an ending, of like almost as good of a shark killing scene as the original Jaws, where he shoots it from that perch as it's sinking in. I mean, it's a little schlockier, of course. It's not as well done, but it's definitely still very cool visually. But then, of course, the chopper scene is definitely a runner-up. I'm just gonna get to the ending stuff that I like to do. Best performance, I would say, is definitely Scheider. I mean, Scheider's like a legit bona fide actor, and he's doing good work in this movie. I mean, he's just giving us more of the same what we loved in Jaws. But of course, Lorraine Gary, same thing. She's really good. But then I think Keith Gordon really shines as the nerd character. I'm actually surprised Keith Gordon didn't go on to do more stuff, because I think he's actually a really, really good actor. And he's awesome in this. He's funny as hell. But then Ann Dusenberry, I think, her performance as the traumatized Miss Amity Island is worth noting. I thought that I was I really believe that she seems super fucked up, honestly. So I admire her commitment to that role. And then Gary Springer as Andy, just because he's a funny, chunky best friend archetype, and I think he does it really well because he's also really sweet. Also, he just has this voice that looks exactly like it goes along with him, with his body and face and shape. So I think, I don't know, he just plays that character really well, and he's definitely so much more likable than Mike Brody, who's such a nothing throwaway character. That's actually probably why they took him out at the end. Genowat Swark is probably like, this kid is such a nothing, and I'm getting nothing out of him. Let's just get him the hell out of here. There's definitely some improvements though that I'd make, and I don't say like, oh, there's definitely improvements. Like I'm trying to bash, but I'm just saying, like you just there's so much of this movie that you could edit down. Like so much of that middle stuff where it's just like the chief interacting with people on land for a long time, and then like a lot of like teen stuff that like I just don't know if it needs to be in this movie. Like I like that it follows the teens so much, and I like that we see the teens being terrorized. But there's just a lot of teen drama that it's not done enough to where I'm invested in it, and it's done like more than enough that it distracts away from like the suspense and the terror and stuff. So, and it takes away from like the main character, Chief Martin Brody, hunting the shark. So I don't know, just maybe cut some of that stuff out. And like literally when I tell you that when the scuba divers go down, like right before the one is attacked by the shark, there's literally like a minute and a half of them just exploring and scuba diving. And I know you're trying to set a tone of like peace and serenity so it can be interrupted by the shark coming in, but it's still a little too long. I think I would put more Lorraine Gary in this movie because she's great. I think she's great in the first one. She's great in this, and I think she's actually the best thing in Jaws Revenge. Jaws the Revenge, the fourth one. And she's like out and about on the boat in that movie, like straight up murdering sharks. So like I think maybe she could have been with Brody during the last half of like the movie where he's like trying to find Mike and stuff. Like she's like, if anything, more put together and like more like, I don't know, she could have helped. And I think some of the writers and producers wanted her to be in the boat, but like I think Howard Sackler was like absolutely not, which I don't know if I really get, because I think it doesn't make sense that she and Hendrix both take Tina back when they find Tina, especially because like Brody doesn't know how to frickin' pilot a boat. Also, I would have really liked to see Mayor Vaughn and Len Peterson get their just desserts. Like Mayor Vaughn gets it in the first movie, and you gotta have that kind of thing because it's so satisfying. Like these guys are being such bullheaded, stubborn like assholes that are like denying the shark's existence, even though there's so much evidence, and like the fact that it's literally happened before. Like they're being so absurdly stupid and ignorant. And just to see them never really, like literally, I think Mayor Vaughn in the last one either gets like slapped or punched in the face or something. And he definitely like gets his comeuppance and his just desserts. Whereas this one, even at the end when they get back, I could like use a scene of like Chief Brody like punching Peterson in the face. Like there's a little bit of one. It is such a throwaway moment where Len Peterson is talking to like Chief Brody's wife, and he's like, oh, listen, Ellen, I really had no idea. And she's like, oh, shame on you. But I'm like, these dudes need to get beat up. But, again, there's so much to like. The shark animatronic looks awesome, and it gets plenty of screen time. And it, like with the scar, it just looks awesome. It looks so cool. There's great action. Really, like that third act is top notch. Like there's like so much suspense, and just it's really thrilling. There's pretty great performances from Scheider and Gary, like I said. And a lot of the teens are really good too. Like their fear is like being portrayed like really accurately, and I think pretty well. Like I think a lot of critics are like, oh, they're so annoying that they're just screaming bloody murder and over. I'm like, yeah, they're getting attacked by sharks. They should be like scared and afraid. Like maybe Jackie overdoes it for some reason, and that's not explained. Tone her down a little bit, but other than that, they're great. I mean, like they shot it, and I'm pretty sure like on Hawaii, or no, Cape Cod. I think they shot it in Cape Cod, and it's very beautiful, very picturesque. Or no, Martha's Vineyard, sorry. And like the Emerald Coast. So like, yeah, it's gorgeous. John Williams' score is incredible. I mean, the script is pretty good. I mean, like the fact that like we don't know that there's a shark until almost the very end, and like there's all these things that are like kind of leading and pointing towards a shark, but like it can't really be proven. And then like the fact that like Mike is like banned from going out in the water, but he like takes advantage of his father like losing his job, and that whole rigmarole to like sneak out and go on the water. And then like Brody doesn't really have the tools necessary to like search for the shark and find the shark until the very end because he's canned. And I thought that was a new element. That was interesting. And of course, like the cinematography is like all dewy and beautiful and stuff. It's like 1978, looks terrific. And I like a lot of the Goonie-ish kids dynamic. I wish they would have either fleshed that out more or just kind of cut a lot of it out together. Because I mean, like, but there's a lot of it that does work, like the Keith Gordon stuff, and like the Mike and Andy stuff, and like the dynamic between like Larry Jr. and his friend is funny. So I like a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I truly think this is a near perfect sequel, and that's why I saved it for last. Because like on its own, it's a good movie. It's a really good thriller. It's just similar enough. It's like we always say, it's just similar enough to the first one, but just different enough to make it worthwhile. You know. So yeah, that's all I got for that kind of stuff. I guess I'll just get to read some trivia real quick, which there's a lot of like little good nuggets of information courtesy of IMDb. Yeah, this first one, the like Mark Gilpin, who plays like young Sean Brody, claims that when they were shooting one of the scenes on the makeshift raft of like wrecked yachts, that they were actually being circled by a real hammerhead shark, because they were filming like in the ocean. You know, that wasn't some universal backlot, that was in the ocean. And I guess the actors were like scared and began to scream at the production crew, but the crew was like oblivious to the danger and assumed the actors were simply in character and gave them a thumbs up, which is nuts. The movie's tagline, "Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water," became one of the most famous and popular taglines in motion picture history. And like it's been spoofed and referenced in countless other movie promotions. The Cable Junction Island that they're trying so desperately to get to at the end was actually a set that caused like numerous problems during filming, because it was like made from plastic fiberglass material, and it was like set on two barges, so the surface of it was like very slippery, and it was like very difficult to even grab a hold on. And like this resulted in like numerous like takes having to be reshot because actors kept like slipping and falling off of it. Like during the end when they all have to like swim to it and climb aboard, I guess they were just falling off left and right. And I guess it wasn't properly anchored, so I guess it once drifted away into the ocean at one point, and the production had to go out and tug it back. In the making of Jaws 2, like a 2001 documentary, the director Jeannot Swark recounted the day he was informed that his island set was like on its way to Cuba. As with the first film, the footage of real sharks used was filmed by Australian divers Ron and Valerie Taylor. Roy Scheider, I guess, did not originally want to appear in this film, but had recently left the production of The Deer Hunter, which led to conflicts with Universal, who had him locked in for a multi-film contract. So the studio agreed to forgive his leaving The Deer Hunter if he did this film. And they would count those as the two remaining films on his contract and cut him loose. And I guess Scheider agreed, but was very resentful of his involvement and clashed frequently with director Swark. And I guess they actually ended up getting... I think Howard Sackler and some of the production people ended up being like, hey, we gotta put this beef aside. We just need to set you guys in a room. We need to talk. And I guess that actually ended up in a fist fight, and they had to be separated by the crew. Many scenes had to be shot in the fall and winter months, and actors had to suck on ice cubes prior to takes to avoid having their breath seen on camera. So it's an interesting trick. I guess Steven Spielberg told the San Francisco Film Festival that making a sequel to anything is just a cheap, carny trick, which is funny because he would go on to do some sequels of his own. Um, and that he did not even respond to producers when they asked him to direct this film initially. But I guess he claimed later in life that his decision was mostly influenced by the problems he had during the productions of Jaws, and that he regrets not being more involved in the production, even as like a producer of some kind. And then like even later on in the production of Jaws 2, Spielberg reconsidered, but I guess Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the production was running too far behind and they couldn't. The director felt that they should show the shark as much as possible, because the drama of like the dramatic heft of the first image of the shark coming out of the water already had occurred in the first film, and that he didn't think he could try to repeat that, and he believed that that the reduction of like the film's Hitchcockian suspense was inevitable because it was a sequel and we already knew it was a shark that was attacking everybody. So delays in shooting meant that John Williams was forced to start working on the score before the film was even completed, which is interesting. The first Hollywood film sequel to actually use the number 2 in its title instead of Roman numerals. The picture at the time of its release was the highest grossing sequel in history until Rocky 2 was released the next year. So, not a very long tenure, but still an interesting milestone. Yeah, I forgot to mention, this movie was originally supposed to be directed by John D. Hancock. But he was, I think he had a lot of, he blames his departure on the mechanical shark, but I think it was more or less because he had never really done anything major like this, and he struggled with like meeting deadlines and things like that, and like creating suspense and action. And I think also he had a lot of trouble with like executives at Universal. Oh, okay. Murray Hamilton's scenes, I guess, who played Mayor Larry Vaughn, were shot quickly because his wife was about to undergo a biopsy for cancer at the time and he wanted to be with her. So I guess that explains why Larry Vaughn is actually like, he's in the very beginning of the movie and then he kind of goes away. I guess the sharks from the original film had rotted while in storage on the Universal lot in the intervening 3 years, and the only pieces that were salvageable were the chromalloy tube frames. So they had to rework everything from scratch. At around $30 million, roughly $120 million in terms of 2020, this was the most expensive film that Universal had ever made. And the second most expensive film at the time after Superman. The lighthouse where the teenagers are seen hanging out in the movie was 80 feet high and was a specifically constructed set in order to give the film like a New England Cape Cod look, which is very interesting. They made a lot of very interesting sets for this movie, it seems. The film Somewhere in Time, directed by Schwark. I love the progression of me pronouncing this guy's name. Schwark, I think is it. Was made because Universal Pictures owed this director a favor because Jaws 2 actually was the studio's like highest grossing movie of 1978. Oh yeah, I don't think I said the budget or like what this movie made. Yeah, this movie was made for $20 to $30 million, and then it made $208 million at the box office. So it made like 10 times what it cost, which was, back then incredible. Roy Scheider, I guess, was paid $400,000 to reprise the role of Chief Brody, which was 4 times what he was paid for the original film. So they really had to pay this man a lot to get him back. I guess Scheider, of course, had a terrible time making this movie, and referred to the film as lousy, in part due to it making everyone's life a misery during production, as he didn't want to do the film. But years after, I guess his attitude towards the film mellowed out. The film, under John D. Hancock's direction and his wife Dorothy Tristan's writing, had originally a different tone and premise than what would eventually be seen in the film. These two had envisioned Amity as a sort of ghost town when the film opened, with several businesses shuttered and the island's economy in ruins due to the events of the last film, which would have made sense. The new resort and condos built on the island by developer Len Peterson were to help celebrate its rebirth, giving the island's economy a much-needed boost. Dorothy Tristan had borrowed a subplot from the original Jaws novel and from a discarded early draft of the first film, in which Amity officials were in debt to the mafia. Both Mayor Vaughn and Len Peterson were anxious for the new island resort to be a success, not only to revive Amity, but to pay back loans from the mob that helped build it, thus leading to Vaughn and Peterson's ignoring of Brody's warning, which actually would have made a lot more sense, which they had kept that. Tristan and Hancock felt this treatment would lead to more character development that would make the story more believable. Mark Gruner, who played Mike Brody, this was his last acting credit. So after this movie, he never acted again. After being in a few 5 or 6 maybe TV movies or television spots before this. So I don't know why he would make it big and then suddenly quit, but some people might be glad that he did, because I don't think he was necessarily very convincing or good in this movie. Excuse me, sorry. This movie was one of a cycle of 1980s and late 70s movies that got made after the box office success of Jaws, that had to do with killer fish or killer sea creatures, and that included the 3 Jaws sequels, the movie Orca, Piranha, Tentacles, Killer Fish, Barracuda, Blood Beach, Piranha 2, Last Shark. I mean, there's an entire list. Robert A. Mattie's shark design was much more complicated and ambitious than the one in the first film. The male body was used. Remember, I said that the 2 bodies were the only things that were that survived for the first film, but a brand new head was made, which made use of an all-new mouth mechanism, which incorporated jowls to disguise the pinching of the cheeks that had proven to be a problem with the shark in the original film. Production lasted 5 months, between August and December 1977. The entire production, including the time when it was shut down, took 10 to 11 months, because I think between John D. Hancock's firing and Jeno Schwartz's hiring, there was some production was shut down for several months, maybe weeks. I guess after Hancock was fired, the decision was made to completely revamp the script, which is when they brought in Carl Gottlieb and agreed to give him an exorbitant amount of money to rewrite the script. The film was originally going to be rated R if the body count wasn't decreased, so that I think they took out kills from the script to make sure to get that PG-13 rating, which I think, I don't know, maybe might have hurt the film in the long run, because I think, again, there's that long gap where there's not a lot going on. I guess John Frankenheimer was considered to direct this film, which would have been very interesting, I think, because John Frankenheimer actually directed a natural horror movie, The Prophecy, which I think is very good. I think, and he's just a very talented director anyway. I think he was had much more prolific projects than Mr. Schwartz did. So I think seeing John Frankenheimer's Jaws 2 would have been very interesting. And also that would have been funny, because then he directed French Connection 2, I think. So then to do Jaws 2 as well, like a sequel to a Roy Scheider movie, is just an interesting connection. Oh yeah, okay, this is actually my favorite bit of trivia. After reading that Jaws 2 is experiencing problems during production and problems finding a director after Hancock was fired, Then 14-year-old Steven Soderbergh wrote a letter to Universal Studios pleading to direct the movie and stated that he would do it for free. And I guess Universal producer Richard Zanuck read the letter when it came in the mail and found it really amusing. And I guess decades later, after Soderbergh had become like a notable filmmaker, Zanuck actually met him at a festival and brought up the letter that he wrote as a teenager, telling Soderbergh that in hindsight, knowing how Jaws 2 turned out, he probably would have accepted his offer if he can go back in time. So I thought that's really cute. In the final, yeah, just like I'm just like, man, imagine if 14-year-old Steven Soderbergh directed Jaws 2 and that was like his first directing credit. I mean, who knows what could have happened? He could have done such a terrible job that he never worked again. But could have been interesting to see. It's so cute that they had that reunion eventually. In the final draft screenplay, the helicopter pilot and Marge, which is like the girl who rescues little Sean, they both survive. The pilot is actually was able to breathe thanks to an air bubble created in the copter's cockpit after it was flipped, and Marge actually manages to avoid the shark by diving underwater. And the pilot spots Marge swimming underwater, goes after her, and then guides her back inside the cockpit so they can share the air. Which I understand that would have been super complicated to shoot. Also, I think you can't really take the kills away from the shark at this point, because it's barely killed anyone already in this movie. You got to give him something. So yeah, like we discussed earlier, John Hancock was the original director and he was fired. I guess he was one of the reasons he was fired is because he kept running into problems with the residents of Martha's Vineyard, because he wanted to board up their homes and their stores to make it look abandoned, like how the original script called for, like I said earlier. But like they refused, and they were he kept like getting into feuds and like altercations with them, because he's like, we have to board up your home, you can't get in here, and she's like, that's my home. And then also, yeah, okay, so I guess he came into conflict with MCA chairman Sid Sheinberg, who was the one who wanted Lorraine Gray, or Lorraine Gary, who played Ellen Brody, to have a bigger role in the film and wanted her to be on the boat in the end. And that Hancock and his wife Dorothy Tristan, their screenplay did not have that in there, so I guess he got on Sheinberg's bad side. And then I guess he ended up firing some unnamed actress, but he did not know that actress was the girlfriend of an MCA executive. So like compounding with all of those other problems, within a month of filming, and 18 months already spent in pre-production, Hancock and Tristan were both fired, which halted the production for several months. And two scenes from the quote-unquote Hancock cut are still in the movie, which is the shark fin rising over the surface after the party, and the shark's like big shock at the end. In a deleted scene, after the helicopter sinks, the shark actually attacks the pilot underwater, and the sounds of the pilot screaming and the copter being damaged are the exact same sounds from Jaws when the shark attacks the shark cage and Hooper. So I would have really liked to see that deleted scene in the movie, actually, but I guess maybe it was deemed like too violent or something. I guess I'm gonna say some science here. I guess sharks have special sensing organs called electroreceptors, which like form a network of like jelly-filled pores in their brain, and I guess it allows sharks to like sense electric fields in the water to avoid them. And I guess sharks are like the most sensitive to electrical fields, like of all animals. So I guess when Chief Brody hits the cable repeatedly with a paddle to get the shark's attention, the shark is like undoubtedly more attracted to like the cable's strong electrical field. It probably would have like known to avoid it like a million miles away. This is just funny. In the beginning of the movie Orca, which came out a year before this, an orca kills a great white shark, and then in this film, the great white shark kills an orca. So it's like a kind of a back and forth. Yeah, so that's all I have for trivia here. I guess we can go ahead and just to wrap up. Lastly, I just like to go through some articles that rank the Jaws movies. One last time we'll go through some articles. One for the road. So I'll go through 4. I'll post them in the show notes too. The first one comes from MovieWeb and is written by Trevin Geyer, published in June of 2022. Oh, okay, not that long ago. Which actually Jaws 2 consistently throughout all these articles, spoiler alert, ranks second to Jaws 1 and then above 3 and 4. So then this article has Jaws 2 coming in at number 2. And then with Jaws 3D in at number 3, and then Jaws The Revenge coming in at number 4. And then the Screen Rant article is pretty much the same thing, except it actually has Jaws Revenge and Jaws 3D flipped. So Jaws 3D is in last, and Jaws The Revenge is coming in behind Jaws 2. And of course, the first Jaws is always going to be on top. And this article was published by Michael Kennedy in 2020. And then Slash Film wrote an article titled "The Jaws Movies Ranked from Masterpiece to Garbage Fire," with the Garbage Fire being Jaws The Revenge in 4th place, with Jaws 3D coming in 3rd, and then Jaws 2 coming in 2nd. And then finally, EW created an article that ranked all the shark movies with the most bite from best to worst, with the first one being Jaws. Here, let's just go through all these here. This article, Jaws 2 comes in 7. It comes in 7th, which I think, that's not bad. But some of the ones that came before it were kind of ridiculous. I don't necessarily agree with you. Chris Nashawady. Actually, which is funny because this article was updated September 6, 2022, so not that long ago. But yeah, so, the best shark movie, according to this guy, was Jaws, which I understand. But then he has Deep Blue Sea at number 2, which I definitely wouldn't say that Deep Blue Sea is better than Jaws 2. As much as I am a huge fan of Deep Blue Sea, and believe me, I am. I watched it last week. I don't think it's better than Jaws 2. And Blue Water, White Death, which is just a documentary, comes in number 3, which I'm like, I don't know. Oh, and like Open Water in number 4, which I've never seen Open Water, but the fact that I haven't definitely makes me think that it's not better than Jaws 2. The Shallows with Blake Lively at number 5. And The Meg at number 6, which is actually blasphemy. The Meg is actually not that good, so that's crazy. Jaws 2 at 7. 47 Meters Down at number 8. The Reef at number 9. Finding Nemo at number 10. Obviously, this article, no offense, is not meant to be taken seriously. 1969's Shark, starring Burt Reynolds, at number 11. 1981's Great White at number 12. Sharktopus at number 13. Shark Night 3D at 14. Jaws 3D at number 15. Dark Tide at number 16. Tintero Killer Shark from 1977. It's a European film at number 17. And then lastly, Jaws the Revenge at number 18. So I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what that article said, but what are you going to do? My personal rankings would definitely be obviously Jaws 1, the original 1975, is the best, and it's my personal favorite, my favorite movie of all time, like I stated earlier. But then, of course, Jaws 2 right on the heels. Like, Jaws 2, as far as my favorite movies go, is definitely like top 50, but Jaws is number 1. And then I would definitely actually probably say Jaws the Revenge. is better than 3D in my opinion. So I think 3D would be in the 4 spot, and Jaws: The Revenge would be at the 3rd spot. Because as much as they're both kind of boring, bland installments, which is like the worst thing you could be when you're a thriller film, when you're like in the thriller horror genre. I think Jaws: The Revenge has like better kills, and like it's just like some of the stuff is like so kooky and dumb that it's like entertaining, whereas Jaws 3D doesn't really have like any of that as far as I can remember, and it's like so well lit all the time because of like the use of 3D to like make sure the 3D effects pop. Everything is so well lit, and like the 3D effects look so unbelievably awful, and they're so like needless and stupid. Like it's not even the shark. A lot of times it's just like floating body parts, and there's like so many like red herrings because there's like, oh, there's a shark, and then it's like, oh, this wasn't the shark, there's this other shark, the mom shark. And like Louis Gossett Jr. and like Dennis Quaid are in it, who I love, but they're like so underutilized. And the mom from Back to the Future's in it, but like for like a scene. And like it's just like it could have been really great, I think. And there's parts about that I do like, but overwhelmingly I think it's very, very bad. And I'll believe me, I'm still during the break. I'll watch them. I'll let you know exactly how bad they are. But like literally, Jaws is an A++. Jaws 2 is definitely an A, whereas like Jaws 3D and Jaws: The Revenge are like in the D range somewhere. But I'll let you know how that ranking I have holds up. But yeah, anyway, I guess that's it. I guess that's all we got. I guess the sequel summer has now officially come to an end, and I just thank you for being. Well, hey, look at that! We've set a new record for longest episode at 2 hours and 21 minutes. I really thought with only 4.5 pages of notes that I wouldn't be able to beat Jurassic Park 3, but here we are. And I guess it makes sense. Jaws 2 was the one that I was most excited to talk about. I think actually when I was like synthesizing this podcast, Jaws 2 was definitely one of the first movies I wanted to do. It was like when they're like, oh, I'll write up a list of ones I want to do. It was like Jaws 2 was like the first one I wrote down, because I think this movie is like criminally underrated. Like it's like nothing. You can't compare it to the first one. Just like you can't compare most movies to the first one. But like in its own right, I think it's still a very watchable film. Definitely better than Deep Blue Sea, Buddy from EW. I'm glad I canceled my Entertainment Weekly subscription. Yeah, fucking joke. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to get so blue on you. But yeah, and I'm just, God, this was super awesome. Getting to talk about Jaws 2 for 2.5 hours. And just getting to watch it again was very, just an incredibly enjoyable experience. And I can't thank you enough for listening and being here with me during this summer season. And I think this season, especially, the podcast has really kind of cemented and kind of, settled into its form. And I just think that's so awesome. And I'm so happy about it. And I couldn't be more grateful. And I know there's, we've already talked about it. I won't keep you, rehashing it over and over again, but there's a lot of good stuff coming too. So I hope you tune in, and I thank you for tuning in already. And I hope you have a nice, couple of weeks. Again, we'll be back in the second week of October with our, Halloween specials, Halloween 4. The Return of Michael Myers will be the first one we cover. So, you guys will hear from me again then. And until then, I hope you guys, enjoy the beginnings of fall, and I hope you had a nice summer, and I know I did as well, even though I don't know if you did, because I just said I hope you did, but just know that I did. And see, I'm just rambling now because I don't want to go, but anyway, thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a pleasant evening, and I'll catch you on the flippity flip. Anyway, goodbye.